My wife couldn't get pregnant no matter how hard we tried, so we decided to do IVF. What surprised me was that before the embryo was formed, I caught my wife swapping my sperm with that of her first love. Later, just as she thought she was carrying a child that was the flesh and blood of her and her first love, when the child grew up and it was time for him to recognize his roots, I laughed because I had already swapped my sperm back and had conveniently replaced my wife's egg with that of my ex-girlfriend's. Chapter 1. I returned home with my son, Ethan, after a medical cooperation project abroad, and was stunned. A whole crowd of relatives I rarely saw were all gathered. If you didn't know better, you'd think we were having a family reunion. Most eye-catching was Lucas, sitting in the middle of the sofa with red-rimmed eyes. Clara, my wife who loves to party and hit the clubs, was sitting beside him, cuddling him with a sympathetic expression, comforting him in a gentle voice. I raised an eyebrow, placed my suitcase aside, and asked Clara, "What's the occasion today? Why all the commotion?" Ethan, standing behind me, crossed his arms with an icy look on his face, glaring at Lucas. He already had an inkling of who this man was. My mother-in-law sat in the main seat, looking upset and hesitant to speak. Before Clara could respond, Lucas, with tears in his eyes, walked up to Ethan and said excitedly, "My dear son, I'm your real father." Ethan quickly stepped back, disgusted. His brow furrowed as though Lucas was something filthy. He took a step back, his voice cold as ice. "My father is Ryan. This kid is really my loyal little buddy." I took Ethan's hand, giving him a reassuring look, then raised my fist and punched Lucas in the face. The muffled sound of the punch echoed through the living room. I spoke with a cold tone, my eyes sharp as knives. "Don't go around claiming family ties." Clara suddenly stood up, quickly helping Lucas to his feet, and yelled at me, "Ryan, are you out of your mind? How dare you hit Lucas?" She raised her hand to strike me. Ethan, quick as a flash, stepped forward and slapped Clara. He gritted his teeth and said, "You dare hit my dad?" Ethan's voice wasn't loud, but carried an undeniable authority. Clara froze, furious and enraged, and raised her hand again to hit Ethan. But Lucas grabbed her, pretending to advise her, "Clara, don't hit him. That's our son." His paternal act made me want to vomit. Clara lowered her hand, glaring at Ethan with hatred, and said, "If it weren't for the fact that you're your real father's son, I'd teach you a lesson today." Ethan sneered, "Hey, I'd like to see what you can do to teach me." His sharp gaze resembled my younger self. I felt a sense of pride in my heart. Truly, he is my well-raised son. Chapter 2. An elder cleared his throat, attempting to suppress the chaotic scene. "Quiet down." His deep voice carried an undeniable authority. Everyone gradually quieted, their eyes all focused on the elder. He turned to Clara and asked, "Clara, you called everyone here. What is this about?" Clara took a deep breath as if gathering courage. She reached out and linked her arm with Lucas's, looking deeply affectionate, and said, "Actually today, I have an important announcement." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the room, finally resting on me and Ethan. I quietly watched her, waiting to see what trick she would pull. She said, "Ethan is not Ryan's biological son." Clara's voice was not loud, but it was like a bomb going off in the living room. Ethan quickly turned to look at me, shock in his eyes. I gestured for him to stay calm. The relatives around us began whispering like a pack of sharks that had smelled blood, excitedly stirring. She continued, "When we did IVF back then, Clara hesitated as if it were hard to say. The doctor said Ryan's sperm quality wasn't good. To spare his feelings as a would-be father, I used Lucas's sperm instead. This idiot, sneaking around and now trying to turn the tables and put the blame on me." Clara's malicious gaze turned to me as if waiting for me to fly into a rage, but I remained calm and composed. So she had no choice but to continue her performance. She said, "Today, I called everyone here because I want everyone to witness." She looked deeply at Lucas and continued, Ethan recognizing his real father. The relatives immediately erupted in discussion. One of them said, "Since Ethan isn't Ryan's son, he has to recognize his biological father exactly. After occupying the position of the Carter family's son-in-law all these years, it's time for him to step down. Ryan has been controlling the Carter family's business all these years, and now that the truth is out, it's time for him to step down from Carter Group." Hearing this, I couldn't help but smirk. These scheming relatives, who had been suppressed and ousted from the company's management by me in recent years, could only profit from the year-end dividends. They had grievances against me, and now they were relishing the drama, hoping to see Clara and me fall apart so they could return to share the company's profits. Ethan looked at the greedy relatives around us, his grip on my hand tightening. I spoke up. Ethan will always be my child. My voice was not loud, but it was firm and resolute. Lucas, looking helpless, sighed. Ryan, how long are you going to deceive yourself? Chapter 3. I wasn't deceiving myself. Ethan is indeed my son. Did Clara and Lucas really think they could fool me? Back then, when Clara couldn't get pregnant, we decided to do IVF. Before the embryos were formed, I accidentally caught Clara and a nurse secretly tampering with my sperm storage, and I overheard her joyfully calling Lucas, saying she had swapped my sperm with his. At that time, I didn't make a sound. I silently turned around and gave the doctor $1 million to use the extra sperm I had stored earlier to swap it back. I even kindly asked the doctor to replace Clara's egg with my ex-girlfriend's. On the day of embryo formation, I witnessed the miracle with Clara. She was excessively happy, probably thinking the child was hers and Lucas's. I looked at her silly face and nearly burst out laughing. All these years, I've watched her behave like a clown, pretending to be kind to Ethan. I couldn't have been happier. She thought she could trap me, but she didn't realize that she'd been playing the role of a mother for over 20 years. Clara interrupted my thoughts, mocking me, stubborn as a dead duck. Although Ethan has been with you all these years, his sperm isn't yours. His real father is Lucas. I spoke calmly, but with a hint of provocation. Are you dreaming in broad daylight? Clara snorted and said, if you don't believe me, let's do a paternity test. I'm also divorcing you. You treat me like a simp, forcing me into marriage. I've been with you for 25 years. I've been more than patient with you. When she suggested divorce, a smile of joy appeared on her face. It seems like she's been thinking about this for a long time. And she dares to say she's been patient with me? She moved into the Carter family for 25 years, but refused to sleep with me for 25 years. While I was raising our child, she was off playing the field with Lucas. While I was fighting in the business world, holding up the Carter family's name, she was clubbing and hanging out with rich second-generation kids. She did make one. This wasn't because I loved her, and that's why I was her simp. I married her just to get the Carter family son-in-law status and take control of Carter Group. Now Carter Group is entirely under my control, so Clara no longer has any value to me. I said, divorce is fine. I shrugged indifferently, but there's no need for a paternity test. I'm certain Ethan is my son. Ethan looked at me, his eyes filled with conviction. Dad, I trust you. Clara and Lucas were both in a panic. She said, Ethan, don't you believe your mother? Ethan ignored her, staying close to me. At that moment, a male college student-looking boy barged in. He walked straight up to Ethan, excitedly calling, brother. Everyone in the room froze. Not only did a father pop up out of nowhere, now there's a younger brother. Chapter 4. I looked at the boy who resembled Lucas, and a vague suspicion began to form in my mind. This must be Clara and Lucas's illegitimate child. They'd kept it well hidden. Clara often didn't come home, and it's no wonder I never noticed she was pregnant. It seems this drama is even more elaborate than I imagined. My mother-in-law sat at the head of the table and asked the boy, Clara, what is going on here? The atmosphere in the living room froze once again. The boy looked like he was on the verge of tears, his eyes red. He said, brother, my name is Jake. I've always known about you. His voice was a bit shaky and soft with a slight tremor. He sneaked a glance at me and quickly lowered his head as if afraid I might scold him. He continued, my dad often talks about you. He says you're very outstanding, very handsome. Lucas, seizing the moment, put on an expression of deep sorrow. He said, Ethan, my dear son, I've missed you so much over the years. He raised his head, his face full of age and hardship as though he had suffered a great injustice. He added, Jake has missed you too. We often secretly came to see you. Jake quickly nodded, eagerly adding, really, brother. I go to your school just so I could be closer to you. He pulled a stack of photos from his pocket and carefully handed them to Ethan. He said, these are pictures of you. I secretly took them. Ethan took the stack of photos and flipped through them. There were photos of him in his graduation gown, smiling brightly, photos of him looking tired after basketball practice, and photos of him debating with classmates, his eyes sparkling. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. All these years, there had been a creepy man lurking around, stalking him, taking photos of him. Clara wasn't idle either. She walked up to my mother-in-law and, pointing at Jake, said in a heavy voice, "Mom, this is your grandson. Today, everyone is here to witness it, so accept him." Clara was no fool. She knew that after my father-in-law passed away, my mother-in-law was the one who had the most say in the Carter family. She invited all the relatives here, but her real purpose was to pressure my mother-in-law into acknowledging this child. She was confident that if my mother-in-law agreed to let Jake recognize his ancestry, I would have no objections. After all, over the past 25 years, she had witnessed my obedience and filial respect toward my mother-in-law. Jake, being quick-witted, immediately turned to my mother-in-law, respectfully calling, "Grandmother." My mother-in-law looked at Jake, then glanced at me, her gaze complex. She didn't immediately respond to Jake's greeting. I knew she felt sorry for me. Not wanting to put my mother-in-law in a difficult position, I spoke up to break the silence. "Clara, making this illegitimate child claim his Carter family heritage and inherit the family fortune is your real goal, isn't it? Why drag Ethan into it?" Chapter 5. I turned to Ethan, exchanging a look. I said, "Even if Ethan isn't my biological son, he is still the only child under my name, Ryan. All my assets, properties, stocks, funds, including 20% of Carter Group shares, will all be left to him. Ethan, if that's the case, would you rather stay with me or go with your mother and this supposed real father?" My son's quick mind spun, his eyes flashing. He immediately understood what I was implying. He instantly threw himself into my arms, rubbing his cheek against my arm, and cheerfully said, "Mom has a younger brother now, and she won't leave me any inheritance. Of course I'll stay with Dad. What a good boy, as expected. He's my student." Skillfully turned the tables with reverse psychology. When Lucas heard that I was willing to leave all my wealth to Ethan, his eyes lit up brighter than a 1,000-watt light bulb. He knew I had substantial assets. Just my jewelry, real estate, and precious metals alone were worth a pretty penny, not to mention the 20% of Carter Group shares, which were essentially a gold mine. Greed, naked greed, showed plainly on his face. He leaned toward Clara's ear, whispering. He said when the old man passed away, to balance things, he divided his 60% share of the group into 4 parts. 20% to Ryan, 20% to the old lady, 10% to Ethan, and you only got 10%. If Ryan transfers his shares to Ethan, and we manage to get Ethan's shares into our hands, you'll have 40%. The urgent task now is to get Ryan to give up his shares and assets, let him leave with nothing, and bring Ethan over to our side." Clara thought for a moment, and Lucas's plan made sense to her. She stood up and, with a motherly expression, said to Ethan, "Ethan, your younger brother can stand on his own. He won't compete with you for inheritance, and I'm willing to give you everything." She paused, then added a condition. "The premise is that you go with Lucas for a paternity test. If the test shows that you're indeed his biological son, then you have to acknowledge him as your father and treat him well." Ethan sneaked a glance at me, and I subtly nodded. "Fine." Ethan agreed immediately, but he shrewdly added, "However, before we do the paternity test, both Mom and Dad have to first go to the notary with me and transfer all the assets to my name." For free, I silently applauded. This kid is sharp. What you hold in your hands is what's real. Don't trust verbal promises. Chapter 6. At this moment, those nosy relatives who love to stir up trouble were all worked up. What Lucas had thought of, they naturally also thought of. One by one, they were rubbing their hands together as if they could already see mountains of gold and silver calling out to them. Clara didn't understand business. If Carter Group ended up under her name, it would be no different from them controlling it. One relative took the lead and applauded. "Good, good, good. This is the way to do it." Another relative pulled out their phone and, while dialing, said, "I'll contact the notary office right now." A crowd of them was buzzing around as if they were preparing for some grand celebration. My mother-in-law, watching their busy activities, was worried and tried to stop me. "Good child, maybe you should reconsider the transfer of assets." I smiled and shook my head, reassuring her, "Don't worry, Mom. I know what I'm doing." My mother-in-law had always been aware of my capabilities. Seeing me so calm, she stopped pressing me. With their help, I transferred all the assets under both Clara and my name. except for each of us having a living allowance of $50,000 to Ethan's name. At the notary office, Clara and Lucas watched Ethan with affection as if they were already envisioning the day when Ethan would lead Carter Group and command the winds and rains, smiling happily. I watched them daydreaming and then looked at my son, who had just become a billionaire. I smiled too, but it wasn't enough for Clara to bleed money. I was going to skin Lucas alive. I said, "Lucas, didn't you say you loved Ethan? Aren't you going to show it?" I casually spoke, my gaze sweeping over Lucas's hypocritical face. I said, "I've been raising your son for over 20 years. It's cost me millions. I don't even need compensation from you. Just give the money to Ethan. After all, he's the one I love the most." Ethan, taking advantage of the situation, chimed in, "Mr. Lucas, you've been with my mom for over 20 years, so there's probably millions. Right now that we're at the notary, don't you want to prove your loyalty to me? Otherwise, I might start doubting that you're not really here for me, but just for the Carter family behind me." Lucas froze, trapped in a dilemma. If he gave the money, it would hurt. If he didn't, Ethan would doubt his motives for claiming paternity. Unable to decide, Lucas gritted his teeth and pulled out a card from his bag, handing it to Ethan. "Ethan, of course I love you. This is $5 million, money I've saved up for over 10 years. Ethan grabbed the bank card without hesitation and immediately called over the notary to proceed with the certification. Lucas stood by, smiling, though his smile was twisted as though he was being forced to part with his flesh. Chapter 7. The paternity test institution was chosen by Clara. Fearing that I might tamper with the results, she picked the most authoritative national-level forensic testing facility. I sneered. How clever of her. After the staff collected blood samples from me, Lucas, and Ethan, I insisted they also collect Clara's blood for the test. Clara looked at me in disbelief. "Ryan, are you crazy? Ethan is undoubtedly my child." I grinned maliciously. "Since we're here, we might as well do it all at once." Though Ethan didn't understand why I insisted on this, he knew I must have my reasons, so he threw a tantrum and insisted that Clara also undergo the paternity test. Now Clara treated Ethan like a king, so she reluctantly agreed to his request. When we left the testing center, Lucas's son Jake came late, holding a bouquet of flowers. "Brother," he called out warmly to Ethan, handing him the flowers and pretending to want to hug him. Ethan's face twisted with disgust, and he shoved Jake away. "Don't touch me. You're gross." That kid was even taller than Ethan, looking all smug and slick. Lucas immediately tried to smooth things over. "Ethan, this is your brother. We should love and support each other as a family." Ethan rolled his eyes. "The test results aren't out yet, so don't go around calling him a relative just yet." I casually said, "I won't disturb your family bonding. Clara, let's go to the Civil Affairs Bureau and get the divorce certificate." Since there were no assets to divide and no child custody issues to negotiate, Clara and I didn't even need a divorce agreement. We went straight to the Civil Affairs Bureau and got our divorce certificate. Lucas's eyes widened, his joy obvious. He hadn't expected the divorce to happen so quickly. He thought I would keep clinging to the marriage, but Ethan stayed close to me, and seeing our close relationship, Lucas's jealousy flared up. After Ethan went to the parking lot to fetch the car, Lucas finally seized the opportunity and sarcastically mocked me. "Ryan, Clara never loved you. She's been with me all this time." Clara, holding Lucas's arm, smiled smugly. "Once the paternity test results come out, Ethan will naturally come back to us." Jake, no longer pretending to be the innocent little brother in front of Ethan, arrogantly sneered. "Now all the money is with my brother. Once the test results come out, you'll be out on the streets begging." I couldn't be bothered to respond to their stupid provocations. Seeing that I didn't react, Clara, thinking victory was within her grasp, revealed her true intentions. "You've controlled Carter Group for so many years. Now it's time for me and Lucas to take charge." I sneered. "So you've been using Ethan to take over Carter Group all along?" Clara snorted coldly. "So what? Now that all the assets have been transferred to Ethan, once the paternity test is done, I will be the real owner of Carter Group." I looked at her coldly. "I'll be waiting to see if you're truly lucky enough to take control of Carter Group." Chapter 8. They thought their little schemes were bound to succeed as if they already had victory in hand. But what they didn't know was that from the very beginning, they had no chance of winning. When I was handing over work at the company, Jake appeared and kicked the general manager out, swaggering over to sit in the leather chair, crossing his legs and claiming that his brother, the the chairman, had made him the general manager. The crowd didn't dare stop him, but I was more than willing to teach him a lesson. I said, "Throw him out." Several security guards immediately moved in to escort Jake out. He jumped up, pointing at them and shouting, "Dare to touch me?" Jake stood up suddenly, pointing at the security guards' noses and yelling, "My brother is the chairman. I'm his real brother. You little dogs dare to lay a hand on me." He cursed at me as well. "You bastard, you've already been kicked out of the Carter family. You have no right to command the employees of Carter Group." He was yelling and pushing the security guards, trying to come at me. Unbelievable. Just as I was about to teach him a lesson, Ethan arrived. He asked coldly, "What's going on here?" Jake immediately switched to a pitiful expression and said, "Brother, you came just in time. This bastard wants to have the security throw me out." Ethan looked at him coldly and said, "This is a company. It's not your place to cause a scene, and I'm not your brother." Just then, a voice came from behind. "Ethan, how can you speak to your brother like that?" It was Lucas, who had also arrived. He added, "You two are brothers. In the future, your brother will help you with the company's affairs. Otherwise, without family support, you'll be bullied." Ethan sneered, "Throw both of them out." Realizing being soft wouldn't work, he switched to a more forceful tone. "I'm the husband of Willow, the heir of Lou Group and David's real father. This group is mine too." I smirked, "Throw them out. Don't let them dirty the company." The security guards, now fully aware of who controlled the company, dragged the two of them out. Makoto was still yelling, "George, you wait. Tomorrow when the results come out, I'll make you kneel and beg me for a meal." I looked at his miserable state and said, "Don't worry. I've been waiting for the results." Chapter 9. Finally, the day Makoto had been eagerly awaiting arrived. I purposely woke up early and wore a full set of formal attire. After all, I was going to enjoy seeing Makoto get slapped in the face. Apart from my mother-in-law, Willow had invited the relatives to the forensic office to witness the process, probably hoping to get more people to laugh at me. How naive. She wanted everyone to laugh at me, but in the end, she was the one who would be laughed at. Before the results were announced, I asked Willow with a smirk, "You chose this forensic office yourself. You won't have any objections to the results, will you?" Willow proudly held her head high and swore, "Of course not. I never go back on my word." I almost laughed out loud. It seemed she wouldn't cry until she saw the coffin. Before the results arrived, Makoto began his performance. He casually draped his arm around Willow's shoulder and seriously said, "Willow, once the results come out, we'll be a family again." As he said this, he shot a provocative look at me. I ignored him and turned to David. Sure enough, David looked just as indifferent, paying no attention to Makoto's performance. Makoto had hit a soft spot and became slightly awkward, but he quickly adjusted his expression and turned to David. "From now on, I'll be your father. If there's anything you want, feel free to tell me." With that, he pulled out a delicate little box and handed it to David. "This is a watch I bought for you as a token of our reunion. Do you like it?" David didn't even look at it and coldly replied, "I don't need it." Makoto's smile froze. Willow hurried to smooth things over. "David, your dad means well." David cut her off. "I don't need his goodwill. I only have one father, and that's George." A warm feeling surged in my chest. My son would always be on my side. Just then, the forensic staff returned with 3 copies of the test results. Makoto, Willow, and Diego instantly perked up, their eyes fixed on the documents in the staff members' hands. Their eyes were like starving wolves eyeing their prey. They looked at me with smug expressions, as if they expected me to be completely humiliated and for them to enjoy wealth and glory. I could hardly suppress my laughter. The forensic staff opened the envelope, and Makoto's breathing quickened. Willow was so excited her hands were trembling. Her face flushed as she muttered, "David, we can finally be a legitimate family." I noticed that she looked at me as if I was a defeated, drowning dog. Makoto was even more dramatic, his body trembling slightly. He said, "David, Dad has finally proven himself." Diego, the idiot, couldn't wait to run to David and said, "Brother, when we get back to Lou Group, you have to make me the general manager. I'm your real brother. Only I will truly help you." He said this with such an air of entitlement, as if being the general manager was already a done deal. I looked at their ridiculous antics and sneered inwardly. They had no idea who the real fool was. Until the final moment, they would never know who the true winner was. Chapter 10. The forensic staff cleared his throat and began reading the results. He said, according to the DNA comparison results, Mr. Makoto and Mr. David. He deliberately paused, and Makoto and Willow leaned in, straining their necks as if they wanted to press their ears to the examiner's mouth. The surrounding relatives held their breath, their expressions varying, all waiting to watch me make a fool of myself. The forensic staff continued, there is no biological relationship between them. The air seemed to freeze. Willow's eyes widened, and she screamed hysterically, impossible. It must be a mistake. Makoto also, how could this happen? How could there be no biological relationship? His face turned pale, and the fear on his face was impossible to hide. Diego grabbed the report, and upon seeing the results, he slumped in the chair, muttering to himself, are you sure you didn't misread this? Let me see. How could this happen? I asked the examiner to read my and David's DNA test results. He read aloud. According to the DNA comparison results, George and David are biological father and son. A stunned murmur rippled through the crowd. Willow seemed struck by lightning. She muttered in disbelief, impossible. I looked at David, my mother-in-law, and the others all looking confused, and I kindly explained, I saw when you tampered with things back then, so I switched my sperm back. As I watched her face grow increasingly ugly, I continued, oh, and by the way, I also switched your eggs with those of my ex-girlfriend. The entire room fell silent in shock. My mother-in-law suddenly raised her head, her murky eyes filled with astonishment. I looked at Willow, speaking slowly, David is not your child. Congratulations, you've been playing the role of my son's mother for more than 20 years. Willow, upon hearing this, snatched the DNA report between her and David from the examiner's hands. After reading the results, her eyes immediately turned bloodshot, and she rushed toward me, aiming to slap me. She screamed, scum. However, I blocked her, pushing her forcefully to the ground. I looked down at her coldly. Makoto, hearing the news, clung to Willow like a drowning man grabbing at a life raft, whispering hoarsely, Willow, if David isn't yours, then he's not part of the Liu family. The heir must be Diego. Makoto's face was full of joy as he tightly grasped Willow's wrist. Willow suddenly understood, and a trace of malice flashed in her eyes. She staggered to her feet and walked toward my mother-in-law, who was still in shock, and said, Mom, everyone, you've seen and heard it. David is not my child. She pointed at me, spitting and shouting hoarsely, he's George's and his ex-girlfriend's bastard child. We can't let the Liu family's fortune fall into the hands of outsiders. Makoto and Diego immediately joined in, shouting right. Throw that bastard David out. The only heir to the Liu family is me, Diego. Chapter 11. My usually composed mother-in-law had finally snapped out of her shock. She completely ignored Willow, her expression complex and unreadable to others. In her rare loss of composure, her voice trembling, she asked me, George, is it true? Seeing her like this made my heart twinge with a hint of bitterness. I replied, it's true. Willow, dissatisfied with her mother's reaction, shook her hand and said, Mom, hurry up and announce that Diego is the heir. My mother-in-law had already regained her composure. She brushed her hand away and calmly asked, do you know who George's ex-girlfriend is? Willow, now furious, stamped her feet and said, what does that have to do with me? Anyway, David isn't our child. My mother-in-law replied, George's ex-girlfriend is your sister Anna. So David is still our child and the legitimate heir. My mother-in-law's words were like a bomb dropping into the crowd. She continued, everyone knows our family tradition. The legitimate eldest son inherits the business. Though we no longer prioritize sons over daughters, the heirs must be the children of the legitimate wife. Only when that line dies out does it fall to you, the illegitimate daughter. She glared at Willow with a sharp look, warning her, when Anna had her accident, your father had no choice but to take you back. Willow, don't forget your place. At the mention of her true identity, Willow's face turned pale. When her father was young, he had been tricked into fathering her with a female secretary. But no matter what, the Liu family could never accept an illegitimate child. Except for paying alimony, her father never looked at her. But fate took an unexpected turn. When Anna had her accident and became a vegetable, with no choice, her father focused his attention on Willow. He made her a condition. If she wanted to return to the Liu family, she had to have George enter the family because my father was her father's savior. Willow had no feelings for me and was already in love with someone else, so she didn't want to marry me. But she understood the benefits of returning to the Liu family. So seeing that I seemed to admire her, she agreed to marry me. Makoto had originally looked down on her poor background, but when she became the Liu family's daughter, he returned to her side. Willow, on the other hand, was loyal to Makoto. The reason we had gone for in vitro fertilization was that she wanted to stay faithful to him, refusing to be with me. The two of them had planned to take over the Liu family after her father passed away, but they hadn't expected her father to leave a backup plan. He divided his shares into 4 parts, creating a balance of power between us, and appointed me as the chairman to manage the company, preventing Willow from entering the company. So Willow had to rely on her shares to take part in the year-end distribution, and without real power, she was extremely resentful. Willow, still struggling, retorted, "I don't believe David is Anna's child. Why should I trust George just because he says so?" Willow was still clinging to her last hope. Chapter 12. I sneered at Willow, then took another paternity test report from my bag. I said, "This is the paternity test between David and Anna." I opened the report and displayed it to everyone, saying, "You don't believe me? Anna is still in the nursing home, and David is right here. You can apply for a national-level forensic organization to take a sample and confirm it on the spot. David is Liu family's child." I'm sure everyone will be convinced now. Makoto and Diego were dumbstruck. They never expected that David was actually Anna's child. The old lady still appeared calm and composed, but there was a glint of tears that flashed in her eyes. The relatives began to murmur, "So David is Anna's child. Then David is the true heir. Looks like Willow, the illegitimate daughter, won't be able to claim the Liu family fortune." Their eyes were filled with contempt as they looked at Willow. Willow seemed to have lost all her strength and collapsed onto the ground, her gaze hollow. She hadn't even had David acknowledge her as his mother, and now she had lost everything. Makoto and Diego were also like withered plants, completely deflated. The relatives understood now that Willow was no match for me. Following Willow would bring them no benefit, so one by one they stood up and left in a hurry. Willow stared at me, lost in thought. After some time, as if she had made a great decision, she walked over to my side with a flattering smile and said, "George, I know you love me. You just didn't like me partying in clubs or being too close to other men, right? I promise I won't contact Makoto anymore. Can I come back to the Liu family?" I looked at her with pity and spoke slowly. "Willow, you're wrong. I never loved you." Her face went pale instantly. She asked, "What did you say?" Her lips trembled as she asked, "Then why did you always stare at me like that? Why did you insist on marrying me?" I coldly explained, "Because you look like Anna, and I was just comforting myself by looking at you. Marrying you was about protecting Anna's legacy. You were the Liu family's daughter, and I had to marry you so I could enter the Liu family as your husband and gain access to the Liu group. It was all about keeping the power away from the other branches of the family. You must be wondering why Anna was my ex-girlfriend. Why would my father-in-law entrust the company to me, but not to his own daughter? Why has my mother-in-law treated me like her own son for so many years? When you were a child, you weren't in the Liu family, so you don't know. Even though I grew up in the countryside, my father-in-law, in gratitude for my dad's life-saving kindness, would bring me to stay at the Liu family villa every summer and winter vacation. Anna and I were childhood sweethearts, and we were already in love. My mother-in-law treated me like a son, and my father-in-law saw me as Anna's future husband. I received the same elite education as Anna. I laughed loudly, like I was looking at a fool. It's laughable that you thought I was just a country boy that climbed into the Liu family because of gratitude, and that you actually thought I loved you." Chapter 13. Willow stood there as though struck by lightning, stunned. She had always believed that I loved her deeply, but now she realized she had just been a pathetic substitute. Everything she had was built on a lie, and now that the lie had been exposed, she had nothing left. Willow completely collapsed. We had been playing a role, a play that lasted for 25 years. Now the play was over, and it was time for the curtain to fall. I asked the housekeeper to pack Willow's things and kicked her out of the villa. She didn't put up any resistance, just stumbled out with a vacant look in her eyes, as if her soul had been drained. Makoto and Diego tried to follow her, but I stopped them. "You two don't get to leave so easily," I said coldly. "Makoto, you've been trying to meddle in the Liu family's affairs and cheat David out of his inheritance. And Diego, You dared to barge into the company and cause trouble. I'll make sure you both pay for what you've done." Makoto's face turned ashen. He knelt down with a thud, grabbing Mayutari and begging, "George, please, let us go. We won't dare to do anything again. I'll take Willow and leave this city forever." Diego, though scared, still had a trace of arrogance. "You can't do this to us. We haven't broken any laws." I sneered. "Laws? There are more ways to make you suffer than just through the law. The business deals you've been involved in, Makoto, I've got all the evidence. Do you really think you can get away with it?" At the mention of his business deals, Makoto's body started shaking violently. He knew I was telling the truth. Over the years, he had relied on Willow's connection to the Liu family to do some shady business, and I had been keeping an eye on him all along. David walked over to me and said, "Dad, let them go. They're not worth our time." He had a calm look on his face, showing no mercy towards them. I nodded. "Fine, but you have to leave this city within 24 hours and never come back. If I see either of you here again, you'll regret it." Makoto quickly nodded and pulled Diego away, who was still reluctant. They scurried out like rats, never to be seen again. With all the troublemakers gone, the villa finally returned to peace. My mother-in-law looked at David with a soft smile. "David, welcome home. You're the true heir of the Liu family." David smiled and said, "Grandma, I don't care about being the heir. I just want to be with you and Dad." A warm feeling filled my heart. I put my arm around David's shoulder. "Good boy. The company will be in good hands with you one day, but for now, just enjoy your life." As for Anna, I would continue to take good care of her in the nursing home. Maybe one day, she would wake up and see how well David had grown up. The sun shone through the window, casting a warm light on us. The long-standing drama had finally come to an end, and a new chapter was about to begin. Chapter 14. I said, "Mom, I've been working on a project with a foreign medical institution. It's about stimulating the nerves of vegetative patients to promote awakening." The old lady suddenly looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. "You mean?" I nodded and said, "Anna has undergone several treatment sessions, and her brain waves are very active. The doctors say she will wake up soon." My mother-in-law was overjoyed, tears streaming down her face. She murmured, "Anna, my Anna." Meanwhile, Willow, kicked out of the Liu family, wandered aimlessly on the street. The false prosperity of 25 years had collapsed in an instant. She returned to the apartment where she used to live with Makoto, but he wasn't very welcoming. He mocked coldly, "You stupid woman, now we have nothing left." Willow turned around in a flash, her eyes red. "Blame me? If you hadn't swapped the sperm back then, would this have happened?" Makoto was stunned. He didn't expect Willow to shift all the blame onto him. He retorted, "But you agreed to it back then, didn't you?" Willow grabbed his arm, her voice rising in hysteria. "Shut up. What's the use of talking about that now? We have no money. Do you know how we're going to live with just 50,000? Makoto shook her off and said, "Then what do you want to do? We can't just go work a regular job, can we?" Willow let go of him, defeated. What now? She was so used to the lavish lifestyle, so accustomed to being adored. Now she had nothing left. Makoto suddenly had an idea. He said, 5 million. David still has the 5 million I gave him. Willow's eyes lit up. She said, "Right, let's go find David." The two of them stumbled to David's apartment. After pressing the doorbell for a while, David lazily opened the door. Seeing them, there was no trace of surprise on his face. He asked, "What are you here for?" Makoto pushed David aside and stormed into the room, shouting, "Give me back the money." David sneered and replied, "Why should I?" Makoto pointed at David, his whole body shaking with anger. Through gritted teeth he said, "That's my money." David walked over to the sofa and casually sat down, crossing his legs. He said nonchalantly, "Ito-san, that 5 million was notarized as a gift to me, so I don't have to return it to you." Makoto felt his vision darkened. He became agitated. "Bew, bew, bew," he pointed at David but couldn't utter a complete sentence. A sharp pain hit his chest, and his vision went black as he collapsed to the ground. Willow froze in shock. She screamed, "Makoto! Makoto!" She rushed over, hugging him tightly, screaming in panic. David, witnessing this, dialed 120 with a calm expression, then, as though nothing had happened, continued reading his book. Chapter 15. Willow and Makoto blamed each other after failing to get the money. When the 50,000 ran out, Willow was broke. Makoto refused to work and support Willow. He told her that if she didn't find a job and continued depending on him, he would kick her out later. Out of kindness, I called a headhunter to arrange a job for Willow. A while later, I invited David to dinner with me. On the way to the restaurant, I hummed happily. David asked why I seemed so cheerful. I replied, because there's a good show to watch later. Sitting in the second-floor private room of a restaurant with an open kitchen, David looked through the transparent glass and saw Willow, who had once never lifted a finger, now wearing a waitress uniform and serving dishes on the ground floor. He raised an eyebrow and looked at me, asking, "Is this it?" I smiled and said, "Of course not. Keep watching." After a while, we saw Makoto walk in with a beautiful woman with a good figure. The two were laughing and chatting intimately. Willow, of course, also saw them. Her expression froze instantly. She shouted, "Makoto, what are you doing here?" Makoto didn't even look at her and continued joking with the woman. Willow's voice grew louder, and she shouted, "Makoto, I'm talking to you." Only then did Makoto look up in irritation, glance at her, and say, "What's wrong? We're eating. Are you blind?" Willow pointed at the woman and said, "You and her." Makoto suddenly laughed, a shameless grin on his face. He said, "What's wrong with me and Susan? Does it bother you?" Willow's face turned bright red, fuming with indignation. She asked, "What is your relationship with her?" Makoto replied, "She's my girlfriend." "What? Is that a problem?" Willow staggered backward, her mind in a daze. "A girlfriend? You actually—" Makoto looked at her provocatively, asking, "What? You think I can't have a girlfriend?" "I'll tell you, Willow, I've been with Susan for over 20 years. All the money I stole from you back then went to support her." He paused for a moment before adding, "And you didn't know, did you? The child you lost wasn't an accident. It was arranged by you, and the truck that caused the accident was tampered with by me." Willow's face drained of color, her soul seemingly drained as well. She stared at Makoto, her eyes filled with disbelief and despair. Susan, standing beside her, sneered and said, "Sis, you're just a side chick." Willow felt her world shatter completely. The man she loved had betrayed her. Her son wasn't even hers. 25 years of devotion had turned into nothing but a cruel joke. In a blind rage, she ran to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and charged back, hurling herself at Makoto and stabbing him like a madwoman, screaming hysterically, "You scumbag! You ruined me! You ruined everything!" Makoto screamed as blood soaked his clothes. Chapter 16. David watched in horror as the bloodbath unfolded before him, while I calmly sipped my tea. The police arrived quickly and took Willow away. David, still stunned, asked me, "Dad, is this the show you wanted me to see?" I set my teacup down and gently explained to him, "David, today I'm teaching you, never show mercy to your enemies." David, puzzled, asked, "Willow and the others tried to seize the inheritance. Kicking her out was enough? Why go so far?" I replied, "Because what happened to your mother wasn't an accident. Willow tricked her into going to the construction site, and the truck that caused the accident was tampered with by Makoto." I tried to stay calm, but my voice still carried a trace of hatred. I still couldn't forget the feeling when I saw Anna covered in blood. For 25 years, I had wished nothing more than to kill Willow and Makoto, but I held back because I wanted them to destroy each other. Willow's job was arranged by me, making it easier for her to get a weapon. Makoto had been led here by me. The woman he was with was a public relations worker, and I had my assistant arrange for her to be given 2 fixed-time restaurant vouchers. I bought sitting right in front of Willow. There was no way she could miss them. Makoto was taken to the hospital, but ultimately died from his injuries. Later, I heard from David that without Makoto's money, Diego's life had become unbearable, and he ended up following his biological mother into becoming a male escort. When his classmates went out to have fun, one even recognized him. What a mockery. Days passed, and life seemed to return to normal. But then, a phone call from the hospital sent ripples through the calm. The doctor said Anna had woken up. I could hardly believe my ears. 25 years, and she finally woke up. I immediately took David and my mother-in-law to the hospital. In the hospital room, Anna lay quietly on the bed, pale but with a clear gaze. When she saw me, she smiled faintly. She asked, "George, why do you look so old?" Tears welled up in my eyes, and my throat tightened. "We've waited so long for you," I choked out. I motioned to my mother-in-law and David, who were waiting outside the door. Anna's gaze shifted to David, and she asked, "Who is this?" I honestly explained that he was our child from IVF. She looked stunned for a moment, then accepted it well, her eyes softening with maternal love as she looked at David. She asked, "What's his name?" I replied, "His name is David." Anna smiled gently and whispered, "David, he's very handsome."